If you had asked me that night, I would have told you it was the best gift I'd ever given anyone. It wasn't wrapped in paper or tied with a bow, just a crisp folder with a title deed and a bank receipt. I had imagined it 100 times, their faces lighting up, the stunned silence, maybe even a few tears. And sure enough, when I handed that folder to my parents on Christmas Eve, it was like handing them a dream come true. Seattle was dressed in fog that evening, the air damp and cold enough to nip at your nose. Inside the Carter house, warmth clung to the walls like an old friend. The fireplace was crackling, its woodsy scent mixing with the garlic and rosemary from Mom's roast chicken. Our tree stood slightly crooked in the corner, decked out in decades of mismatched ornaments, pipe cleaner candy canes, popsicle stick stars, a faded paper angel I'd made in 3rd grade. Dad was stirring his eggnog with a cinnamon stick when I pulled out the folder. "Before we open presents," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "there's something I want to give you both first." They exchanged puzzled glances. Mom set her glass down, wiping her hands on her apron. Inside the folder was a single sentence typed in bold, "Your mortgage has been paid in full." Dad blinked. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Melissa, what is this?" "It's real," I said. "The house is yours. Free and clear." Dad sat down slowly, as if gravity had doubled. He looked at me the way he used to when I brought home straight A's from high school, like he couldn't believe he'd had anything to do with someone like me. "You're the rock of this family," he whispered. It was the last time he ever said it. Later that night, after the initial shock wore off and Mom had cried her way through half a box of tissues, we sat around the fireplace talking about dreams, the big ones we always put off. That's when Dad brought up the restaurant again. "Nana's kitchen," he said, eyes twinkling. "Remember that meatball soup she used to make?" Mom smiled. "And her stuffed shells. She always cooked like she was feeding an army." I've always thought we could open a place like that. Something small, warm, a family place. I saw the wistfulness in their eyes, and something else too, a flicker of hope that hadn't been there in years. The idea lodged in my brain like a loose puzzle piece. I couldn't stop turning it over. By New Year's, I'd quietly run the numbers. Even with the upfront costs, I could swing it. I was making good money as a consultant. I didn't have kids, no mortgage, no student loans. And frankly, I wanted something that felt like home again. After Grandma died, our family had grown a little thinner, emotionally, not just in numbers. So I sat them down in January. "If you're serious about the restaurant, I want in. I'll put in the capital. You just run it." Dad's mouth dropped open. "Melissa, no. That's too much. You've already." "Family helps family," I cut in. "This is for all of us. And I believe in it." "I believe in you." Tyler, who had been half asleep on the couch, perked up. "Wait, actually open it? For real?" I nodded. "For real." He grinned. "I could help out. I mean, I haven't figured out grad school yet, and maybe this is my thing, you know." Mom squeezed my hand. "You really want to do this?" "I do," I said. "Let's build something together." There was some back and forth. Mom worried about taxes. Dad fretted about suppliers. Tyler asked if he could maybe try designing the menu board. In the end, they agreed. I transferred $320,000 into the business account we opened jointly. Tyler signed on as operations manager. Mom said she'd help with recipes and decor. Dad would run front of house. And me? I'd oversee from a distance, help with logistics, cover costs when needed. Allison, my best friend since college and a contracts attorney, offered to draw up paperwork. I turned her down. We don't need contracts. It's family. I said it like a vow. We named it Nana's Table, after Grandma. The logo featured a steaming bowl of pasta and a warm red script. We painted the interior a soft yellow, hung vintage black and white photos, and strung fairy lights above every table. Mom cried when we laid out the first menu, her mother's meatball soup at the top. Opening day was overcast, but buzzing with energy. We stood in front of the storefront, beneath a vinyl banner, opening soon. Nana's Table, a family dream. Dad held the keys. Tyler clutched a clipboard. Mom had flour on her cheek. And I? I was smiling so wide my face hurt. A photographer from the local paper took our photo. We were a family again. We were building something that would last. At least, that's what I thought. I didn't realize I was investing in more than a restaurant. I was betting on being part of something that would later reject me. I remember thinking, finally, Tyler found someone with direction. He'd brought girls around before, yoga instructors, baristas, even one aspiring poet, but none of them stuck. So when he showed up that Sunday evening with Brooke Hamilton on his arm, dressed in a cream blouse and a blazer like she had just walked off the set of a Food Network pitch meeting, I figured maybe this time would be different. It was the summer of 2019, and Nana's Table was humming along. Sundays had become our busiest day. Churchgoers came in for meatball soup, and couples lingered over tiramisu. We always saved a booth in the back corner for our family dinner, a little tradition we'd managed to keep even through the chaos of restaurant life. I arrived early to prep the weekly reports, balancing inventory numbers with a scone from the bakery across the street and my favorite pen. I loved that quiet hour before the crowd rolled in, the clatter of pans, the smell of oregano and tomato, the sound of Dad whistling in the kitchen. When Tyler walked in with Brooke, heads turned. She had a kind of presence, the kind that made you sit up straighter, smooth your shirt, smile wider. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a compliment. "Melissa, this place is absolutely charming. The branding's tight and the ambience? Elevated comfort. Love it." I smiled, unsure if I'd just been praised or audited. Over dinner, she name-dropped the Fairmont Hotel Group like it was casual conversation. Back when I consulted for Fairmont, we piloted a weekend brunch concept that quadrupled foot traffic, she said, between bites of lasagna. Mom was instantly charmed. She poured Brooke an extra glass of wine and asked for her chicken marsala recipe. Dad insisted on giving her a kitchen tour, something usually reserved for health inspectors and the occasional food blogger. Tyler beamed through the whole thing like a puppy who'd finally fetched the right stick. "She's not like the others," he told me as we cleared plates. He was right. Brooke was polished, strategic, calculated in a way I hadn't expected. She offered to help with the brunch concept, just a trial run, she said. And before I could blink, we had a 2-page mock-up menu, a new logo design, and an event page live on social media. I admit, the brunch was a hit. The line stretched down the sidewalk that Saturday. Tyler floated through the restaurant, high-fiving staff and quoting Yelp reviews. Brooke worked the front with the charm of a seasoned maitre d', greeting guests like old friends. "She's good," I told myself. And it's nice not to have to carry all the weight. At first, I welcomed the help. Running a restaurant isn't romantic. It's invoices, freezer repairs, and trying to stretch one case of basil across 3 dishes. If Brooke wanted to take a few things off my plate, who was I to argue? But then little things started to shift. Staff started going to her with questions. One afternoon, I overheard our host asking Brooke whether we should switch to a new reservation app. Another day, our pastry chef said, Brooke asked me to trial a lavender panna cotta next week. Hope that's okay? It wasn't that I was jealous, at least, not at first. It was more like watching a piece of furniture shift in your home. The couch is still there, but it's angled just differently enough that you start bumping into it. Then came the menus. I came in one morning early, as usual, and heard voices coming from the kitchen. When I pushed the swinging door open, I saw Brooke standing at the center of the prep station, surrounded by the staff. She was leading a pre-shift meeting, a clipboard in one hand and a stack of newly printed menus in the other. The menus had changes, new items, rearranged sections, dishes we hadn't costed out. I stepped forward. Hey, when did we approve these? Brooke looked up, as casual as ever. Oh! I figured we could try this layout for a week, just to see how guests respond. Tyler and I brainstormed it last night. You were swamped, so we didn't want to bother you. Swamped? I'd been prepping payroll and inventory projections until midnight. This was the first I'd heard of it. The staff looked at me, then at her, waiting. I gave a tight smile. Let's table the menu changes until we've had a full team review. She nodded, still smiling. Of course. Just wanted to be proactive. Tyler came in a few minutes later, oblivious, holding 2 iced lattes, one of which he handed to her with a wink. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling, wondering why the pit in my stomach felt so familiar. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something softer, a whisper of doubt, a warning bell in the distance. It was the first time I wondered if my role wasn't as secure as I thought. And deep down, I already knew the answer. The worst kind of betrayal doesn't happen with a slammed door or a shouted insult. It happens when no one tells you the meeting's been moved. It started with a missed email, then another. At first, I thought it was just an oversight. Maybe Tyler had forgotten to hit reply all, or Brooke had typed the wrong address. But as the weeks passed, it became clear I wasn't being looped in anymore. Not on inventory reviews, not on staffing decisions, not even on the holiday menu plans. The silence around me wasn't empty, it was intentional. Mom once told me, "You keep this place running." She said it in 2020, right after we reopened following the lockdowns, when I'd helped renegotiate the lease and rewrote our entire service model for takeout. But now, 2 years later, I wasn't even sure she remembered saying it. The restaurant had survived the pandemic, somehow. We'd scrapped together loans, shaved the menu down, and pivoted hard into delivery. Brooke was quick to take credit for the brunch boxes. She even gave a podcast interview where she described herself as part of the original founding team. I wasn't mentioned once. By late 2021, I was splitting my time between consulting contracts and Nana's table. I still came in twice a week, still handled payroll, still did the quarterly numbers. But the vibe had shifted. The laughter was gone. The chalkboard specials had been replaced with slick digital signage. Everyone wore matching aprons now, a branding decision Brooke said gave professional polish. It looked more like a franchise than a family dream. Chef Antonio noticed it too. One afternoon, while I was reviewing vendor invoices, he leaned over and said quietly, "Things feel different. Like a hotel kitchen." He meant it as an observation, not a complaint. But it hit me harder than I expected. I opened our expense account and saw charges I hadn't authorized. A design retainer for $3,500, 2 bulk wine orders from a new distributor, and a signed contract for a winter pop-up in Bellevue, complete with Brooke's signature next to the title Director of Events. I stared at that line. Director of Events. We'd never created that position. We never even discussed it. The next day, I called Tyler. "Hey, can we talk about some of these new expenses? I asked gently. I wasn't looped in, and Melissa, not everything has to go through you, he snapped. We're trying to be more agile. You've got your consulting thing. We're just making things work here. But I'm still part of this. You know that, right? He sighed. Look, Brooke's got experience. She's helping. You're kind of more corporate, you know. That word, corporate, landed like a slap. I'd given everything I had to this restaurant. I'd kept it afloat when no one else knew how to read a P&L. And now I was too professional? The following Sunday, I checked Instagram while sipping coffee and nearly dropped my mug. There, under a soft-filtered photo, was my entire family sitting at our usual booth, plates of gnocchi, wine glasses mid-toast, smiling like a toothpaste commercial. The caption read, "Sunday family dinners at Nana's table, our favorite tradition." I hadn't been invited. No one had texted. No one had even mentioned it. A week later, I showed up for our monthly planning meeting. The calendar invite had disappeared from my phone, but I assumed it was a glitch. I walked into the private dining room, laptop in hand, and stopped cold. Brooke was already seated at the head of the table. My seat. She was mid-sentence, flipping through a slide deck on projected sales for Q2. Tyler was next to her, nodding. Mom sat across from them, sipping tea, eyes darting between me and the screen like she didn't know where to look. Dad smiled weakly. Melissa. Oh, we didn't think you'd be coming today. I wasn't aware the meeting had moved. I replied, voice even. Brooke smiled that polished smile. Oh, we changed it last minute. Tyler thought it'd be better to get an early start. I sat down anyway. No one offered to catch me up. The meeting dragged on. Budget revisions I hadn't seen. Marketing materials I hadn't approved. Brooke talking as if she were CEO. I spoke once about staffing ratios and was politely ignored. Afterward, I packed my laptop and left without saying goodbye. That night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my computer, and pulled up a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were PDFs, bank statements, and wire transfer receipts. All neatly labeled, chronologically ordered. Every dollar I had invested. Every repair I'd covered. Every emergency fund I'd topped off without question. 101 receipts. And not one thank you note. It took only 3 sentences to undo 3 years of sacrifice. I was standing in my kitchen, rain pattering softly against the window, dusting powdered sugar over a batch of lemon bars, my mother's favorite, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't think twice as I wiped my hands on a towel and checked the screen, expecting a simple, "Don't forget the salad," or maybe a last-minute request for decaf. But what waited for me was a text that changed everything. You weren't invited. Brooke doesn't feel comfortable. I read it twice. 3 times. My mind refused to process the words. Surely, there was a mistake. Surely, my mother had meant to send this to someone else. For a brief, wild moment, I wondered if I was still asleep, dreaming one of those anxiety dreams where you show up to class and the building isn't there. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my ears. The call rang and rang until it rolled to voicemail. I hung up, hands shaking, and tried again. Nothing. I texted her, desperate, "What do you mean I'm not invited? We always do family dinner." No reply. Instead, minutes later, Tyler's name flashed on my phone. Please don't make this about you. Brooke wants today to be peaceful. So, it was Brooke. Brooke, who had slowly taken over the restaurant and then, by some invisible hand, the family itself. Brooke, who had started as a helpful guest and become the gatekeeper of every gathering, every decision. It hit me, then all at once. that Tyler's old promise, "You'll always be part of this family," was just that. A promise. One that lasted only as long as it suited everyone else. The numbness set in, heavy and cold. For a while, I just stood there, staring at the frosted window, listening to the rain and the faint hum of my refrigerator. It felt like there was an entire world moving on without me, right on the other side of that glass. My eyes fell to my laptop on the dining table, still open from prepping the last week's payroll. On impulse, I sat down and clicked through my folders, hundreds of documents, labeled and dated. Receipts, wire transfers, invoices. Every dollar I had ever spent for them. 101 digital footprints, each one a memory, a new dishwasher, a loan covered in the early months, the last-minute bakery order for Mom's birthday. I scrolled through, face hot with anger and humiliation. The depth of the betrayal felt bottomless. There was no grand confrontation, no climactic fight in the rain. Just exclusion, delivered through a glowing blue bubble. A part of me wanted to scream, to drive to the restaurant and demand an answer, to force them to say it to my face. Instead, I did something else. Something quieter. I opened my bank account and canceled every single recurring payment I had set up for Nana's table. Inventory system gone. Marketing agency retainer canceled. Payroll buffer revoked. I moved every digital receipt, every contract, every wire transfer into a secure cloud folder, locked and encrypted. For once, I thought of protecting myself instead of them. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I called Allison, my old college friend and the best attorney I knew. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Mel, everything all right?" I swallowed. "No. I'm done. I want out. Can you draft whatever I need to dissolve my investment?" She paused only a beat. "Of course. Did you want to talk about it?" I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "Not now. Just start the paperwork. I'll send you all the files." "Send me everything," she said gently. "I'll take care of it." "And Melissa? You did everything you could." After the call, I turned back to my laptop. The last file in the folder was the biggest, the down payment on the restaurant. The day I thought I was buying a future for all of us. I hovered my finger over the delete key, let myself remember my father's words that night, "You're the rock of this family," and let the memory fade as I pressed delete. I sat for a long time, the apartment silent except for the rain. One by one, I blocked every family number. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. I knew if I left any line open, I'd be tempted to beg for an explanation, to look for the smallest opening that meant they still wanted me. It was the quiet unraveling of everything I had built. No grand finale, no big scene. Just the realization that sometimes you have to stop fighting for people who won't fight for you. 2 hours later, the phone rang from a number I recognized. My mother. For a moment, a surge of hope. Maybe she'd realized what she'd done. Maybe she was ready to apologize. I answered. "Melissa, why is the reservation system down? The staff can't process bookings and everyone's upset." No apology. No mention of the text. Just the business. That was when I knew, finally and completely, that I was truly out. People think the hardest part is the moment you walk away. They picture a door slamming, maybe some shouting, tears in the driveway. But I know now the hardest part comes later. In the silent hours after, when the phone keeps lighting up with messages you never wanted to read. Spring came late to Seattle that year, or maybe I just noticed the gray more than usual. My apartment felt enormous and echoing, a hollow place where I could hear every sigh and passing bus. Some mornings I left the TV on all day, just so the living room wouldn't feel so empty. The calls started within 24 hours. Not from my family directly, those numbers were blocked, but from unfamiliar area codes, the restaurant landline, even vendors I recognized from my spreadsheets. First, Dad left a voicemail. "Melissa, the payroll system isn't working. Did you change something? Staff are upset. Can you help just this once?" Then Tyler, frantic. "Mel, the credit card machine's down. We're losing reservations. Please, don't let everyone suffer because you're mad at us." There were emails too. Brooke stood out in my inbox, subject line all caps. "Stop holding US hostage. This is emotional blackmail." She wrote, "You're punishing everyone for not getting your way. You said you wanted out, so why sabotage the business? Tyler's a mess. You've proved you never cared." I stared at the screen, numb. I thought about all the years I'd spent bailing them out, the quiet nights reviewing vendor payments, the afternoons I'd covered cash shortfalls from my consulting checks. No one remembered those nights. No one ever sent a thank you note. But I couldn't stand the idea of innocent people, our waitstaff, Chef Antonio, not getting paid for mistakes they hadn't made. So I made a single, final payment to cover that week's payroll, marking the wire with a simple note. "This is temporary. Permanent support ends today. Please make alternative arrangements for your staff." I sent a copy to Allison, who called me later that night. "You did the right thing, Mel. But don't let them pull you back in. This is the moment to draw your line." Chef Antonio started sending updates, more personal than professional. "Customers keep asking about you. Brooke's changing the recipes, no more Nana's meatball soup. Last week, she tried to introduce a kale risotto. Diane's upset, but says it's not her place to intervene. Morale is not great." I thanked him for his loyalty, promised to write him a glowing reference if he ever needed it. He told me, "It's not the same place, Melissa. You built the heart of it." Meanwhile, Allison and I worked out a structured settlement, $250,000 repaid over 5 years, with mandatory financial coaching for the family. Allison thought I was too generous. "You could force a full buyout, with interest." I shook my head. "This isn't about money. I want it to be fair, not ruinous. Let them keep the business, but learn to stand on their own." Outside, the world spun on. I watched the cherry blossoms bloom along the parkway, people holding hands, college kids walking dogs. I envied their lightness, their freedom from wounds that only family can inflict. I started seeing Dr. Simone Marshall, a therapist recommended by Allison. On our second session, Dr. Marshall asked me what hurt the most. I surprised myself when I said, "It's not about the money. I can always make more money. It's the betrayal knowing I could be written out so easily, like I never mattered." Dr. Marshall nodded. "You're mourning not just the relationship you had, but the family you thought you had." We worked on boundaries, on how to name what I felt without drowning in it. I realized, for the first time, that I'd invested in my family not just financially, but as a way to secure my place with them, as if love could be purchased, or at least proved by sacrifice. That lesson came with a cost, but also a kind of freedom. Then, late one Friday, an email arrived from Tyler. "Brooke's gone. She said she didn't sign up for a sinking ship. You were right about her. I'm sorry, Mel." I read it twice, heart heavy and light at the same time. Brooke had always been good at finding the exit. Tyler still didn't understand why I left, but he was starting to see what was lost. A week later, a plain white envelope came in the mail, postmarked from the old house. Inside was the first settlement check and Folded around it, a note in my mother's careful handwriting. "We miss you. Please give us a chance to make this right. Love, Mom." I stared at the words for a long time, not sure if I should cry, laugh, or tear them up. Maybe all three. I tucked the note away, along with the check, and poured myself a cup of tea. Some days, the ache was dull. Other days, it was sharp as the spring rain. But I held on to one truth. I was done begging for belonging. My worth was never meant to be measured by how much I gave. 100 days after the text that ended the old version of my family, I found myself sitting across from them in a sunlit room with pale yellow walls and a round clock that ticked just a little too loudly. We were at Dr. Simone's office, a neutral zone where apologies didn't have to be grand and eye contact didn't last longer than anyone could stand. None of us said the word therapy out loud. We just called it our Saturday check-in, like it was something ordinary, the way Sunday dinners used to be. For 6 months, we came every week. Sometimes I was angry, sometimes numb, sometimes unexpectedly gentle. Dad talked more than I expected, confessing he never knew how to balance pride in my accomplishments with his own old-fashioned discomfort about not being the provider. Mom admitted she'd often seen conflict coming and simply turned away, hoping if she stayed quiet, everything would fix itself. Tyler said what I'd known for years. He'd always felt like the little brother who couldn't keep up, and Brooke had offered him a shortcut to significance, at my expense. Dr. Simone kept us honest. She let us flounder and fumble, pushing only when we tried to sweep too much under the rug. One afternoon, as Dad apologized again for not being a better leader, she said, "Maybe leadership, for your family, now looks like making space for each person to set their own boundaries." Boundaries. The word used to sound cold to me, like a fence thrown up between people who used to love each other. Now I saw it as a gift, a way to finally stop measuring my value by what I could sacrifice or how much I could forgive. I told them, clearly and calmly, I'm not going to invest in the restaurant again. And I may not show up for every holiday or answer every phone call right away. But I am willing to be here as myself if you can accept that's enough. Nobody argued. Nobody promised it would be perfect. That was new, and it was enough. Meanwhile, life rolled on. Tyler, to his credit, started taking real restaurant management classes. He sent me a text after his first exam. Passed. Didn't even cheat. Wish you'd been my teacher from the start. I told him I was proud of him. And I was. The restaurant itself got smaller, leaner. No more flashy brunches or themed cocktail nights. Just good food, loyal regulars, and Antonio running the kitchen with a blend of Italian stubbornness and gentle humor. Sometimes he'd text me photos of the weekend specials, the bread baskets, the way customers still ordered my grandmother's meatball soup, always at least one table, every night. The first time I agreed to dinner with my parents again, I insisted it be at their house, not at Nana's table. It was quieter that way, no chance of running into old customers or staff, no echoes of what we'd lost. Mom made her classic roast chicken, Dad brought out the good plates, and Tyler even showed up on time, flowers in hand. We talked about small things, work, the Mariners, the neighbor's new dog. I didn't bring up old wounds, and neither did they. It was enough to simply sit, to eat together, to let the silence between stories be gentle instead of charged. Late that summer, I got an invitation I hadn't expected. Antonio reached out. "Come by for dinner?" Just as a guest. No speeches, no drama. It took me weeks to reply. But as fall colored the city's trees, I realized I wanted to see for myself what had survived. Saturday evening at Nana's table, I paused before going in. Through the window, I saw Antonio moving confidently in the kitchen, Tyler greeting a young couple at the door, my parents at a side table sharing a plate of pasta, laughing over something small. The restaurant felt both familiar and entirely new. When the hostess, a college student with curly hair and bright blue glasses, offered me the family table, I hesitated. Then, smiling, I shook my head. Just a quiet booth, please. In the corner. She nodded as if she understood. From my booth, I could see almost everything. The dining room glowed with warm light, the hum of conversation, the clink of forks. The menu was simpler now, but my grandmother's soup was still there, unchanged. Halfway through my meal, Dad walked over, napkin in hand. He stood for a moment, looking awkward and gentle and smaller than I remembered. "Good to have you here, Sammy," he said quietly. I looked up, really looked at him, and smiled. "Good to be here," I said. And, for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The table is smaller now. Some chairs are empty, and not all wounds will heal perfectly. But there is something honest in this new arrangement, a kind of strength in knowing my worth isn't up for negotiation. My legacy isn't just a name on a restaurant or a long list of sacrifices. It's the boundaries I set, the self I reclaimed, and the quiet belief that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up just as you are and trust that it's enough. Sitting at that smaller table, I finally understood that sometimes letting go is the first step to healing for ourselves and for those we love. Through all the loss, I learned that true belonging isn't earned by sacrifice, but by showing up as yourself, boundaries and all. Family may not always look the way we dreamed, but the heart of it is caring, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. If my story resonates with you, I'd be glad to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments. After all, life is richer when we share our journeys and remind each other, you're never too old to choose your own peace.